Thinking.
Well, good morning, everybody. I am handling the welcome and introductions. So today is our Tillamook County Housing Commission meeting of October 5th. I can't believe it's our October already. So I'd just like to welcome everybody to our meeting today. We have a pretty full agenda, and I'd like to go ahead and start with housing commissioners. Let's go ahead and start with Michelle.
Michelle Yank, large employer representative, Advent of South Tillamook.
Megan Carpenter, representative of the City of Tillamook.
Heidi Luquette, I'm a member at large.
Erin Scar, Tillamook County Commissioner, liaison to this group.
Chris Lockenmeyer, large employer representative, representing the Tillamook School District, basically.
Carrie Fleischer, member at large.
Parker Sammons, I'm the housing coordinator.
Lynn
Ed
Todd.
Gallagher, Ed Gallagher, remote. This is by an explanation. I was exposed to COVID by my son who was visiting, and I decided I did not want to be a super spreader to this group. So here I am, and no symptoms, but I'm remote.
Thanks, Ed. Go ahead.
Oh, Lynn Tone, community development staff.
And is there any other housing commissioner? I see Chris.
Kristen.
Kristen?
Hi, I'm here.
Good morning.
Member at
Oh,
large.
did I miss something? Sorry.
Introduction?
Okay. Chris Kafka, sorry, couldn't get in. I am a member at large based in Rockaway. Hi, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. And is there any other members of the public that are interested in introducing themselves? Let's just go ahead and start in the room.
Nate Stice, Regional Solutions out of the Office of Governor Tina Kotek, and we have some team members here today too.
Thanks for being
Could I ask people to speak up?
Sure, your name?
I'm John Stanley.
Thank you for coming.
Hi, John.
Thanks for coming. Is there anybody else online that would like to introduce themselves?
Good morning, this is Dave Bennett, South County Representative.
Good morning, Dave.
Oh, he must be a phone number.
And hi, good morning. This is Colin Cooper, new COLPAC, Columbia Pacific Economic Development District, if you don't know that acronym, and new to COLPAC, and happy to be here this morning.
Thank you.
I'll jump in. This is Melanie Olson. I'm Regional Development Officer with Business Oregon and member of the Regional Solutions team.
I'll jump in. My name is Tanisha Rosas. Oops, sorry, Brett. Legislative coordinator at OHCS.
Hi, good morning. I'm Brett Estes. I'm the North Coast Regional Representative for the Department of Land, Conservation and Development and part of the Regional Solutions team.
Good morning, I'm Kim Travis, also with Oregon Housing and Community Services in the Affordable Rental Housing Division.
Well, thank you all for coming, and
Sorry, this is Miss Carlson Swanson, nonprofit representative.
Thank you, Miss.
And it does look like there's a couple members of the media on there. I don't know if they want to introduce themselves.
Is there anybody else that would like to introduce themselves?
This is Will Chappell from the Tillamook Atlantic Herald, just watching in.
Thanks. All right, well, I will turn the meeting over to Parker.
All right. Well, we'll begin with our mission minute, which is normally performed by Ed. Ed, I haven't done a mission minute before. Would you still like to take this one today?
I could probably handle that. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to share? There you go.
There are always things to share. I think,
I know.
what have we not talked about in this group yet? Gosh.
I think most of the things I want to share with you guys will come up in the
Same.
committee updates.
Same.
Yeah. Well, then we will save our time for that and open for public comment.
Global warming,
Yes.
or hotter than usual summer. No public comment for me.
Well, thank you for joining. All right. Well, without further ado, I think we can move on to the presentation from the Regional Solutions team over there. And I don't know which one of you would like to share your screens for your slide deck, but everybody here also has a printout of all of your slides as well.
Since it got listed as a regional solutions presentation instead of OHCS and Business Oregon, maybe while they're getting their slide deck set up, I can talk for 2 seconds.
Absolutely, that'd be great. Thank you.
We'll get straight to the content, but regional solutions is the governor's collaborative approach to community and economic development. We have staff that cover 11 regions around the state and are really meant to be responsive to communities' needs and priorities. We cover a variety of agencies, including Business Oregon, DLCD, the Department of Environmental Quality, ODOT, Business Oregon, and also invite along OHCS, and also typically include the economic development districts in sort of our team meetings. And so I know the commissioner reached out through Brett to get a few of our regional solutions team members here, and I just decided to invite everyone because housing remains an important part of our work plan. Sort of one of the key regional initiatives that we're checking into to try to think about how the state enterprise can help engage and move your goals around housing forward. And there's a lot of fun work coming out of Salem right now on this front that I hope we can get another presentation about at a different point. So that's it. And so thank you to Regional Solutions team alum now, Kim Travis, for helping to pull in folks from Housing and Community Services, and Melanie for jumping in.
All right, well, thanks everybody. Great to be here, and just noting that we do not have the ability to share on this platform. It's not allowing us to share screens, so I don't know if there's something that can be enabled for that.
Yep, we're giving permissions right now.
So Kim has permission.
Kim now has permissions, and yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, can you see my screen?
We sure can.
Okay, great. All right, well, I think Tanisha is going to, I think the request was related to hear legislative updates. I understand DLCD provided some legislative updates at your last meeting. So my colleague Tanisha is going to walk through some key legislative actions, and there's a lot. If you have the printout, there's a lot of slides here. There's a lot of content, and Tanisha will kind of walk through and then take questions. Tanisha, as we go along, do you want to take questions?
Yeah.
Or
If you have a question, raise your hand, grab my attention. Either way. So if you want to go to the next slide, the first thing we're going to talk about is the legislative investments as a whole. Again, my name is Tanisha Rosas, and I'm a legislative coordinator at Oregon Housing and Community Services. So overall, we got $1.14 billion allocated to OHCS this biennium, which is our largest biennium budget we've ever seen. We're really excited about it, and I know a lot of hard work was put into it by a lot of different people in order for us to get this investment. So very broadly, if this slide sums up all of the big chunks of money we got. So $721.7 million invested in supply solutions, $349.6 million for emergency homelessness response, $46.1 million invested in community homelessness resources, $20 million to support homeownership, and $1.7 for language access. If you want to go to the next slide. As I am saying this, if you look at the emailed copy of this that I sent out, if you get that in electronic thing, all of the green underlined things are linkable. There's a lot of resources. There's a bunch of resources slides at the end, because I know I'm going to speed through this. If you want to digest it further, there's more information involved so that I don't have to be the only source of info. Y'all can go back and have that access whenever you want it. So we're gonna break up by division right now. For the affordable rental housing side of things, we got roughly $600 million in bond resources. So that includes Lyft homeownership and Lyft rental and our permanent supportive housing funding as well. Then we got $50 million for preservation services. So that's preserving and improving existing affordable rental housing and preventing rent increases in affordable housing that already exist and preserving our manufactured home parks. In addition, we got a brand new $9.7 million for pre-development. We have done pre-development in the past. This will be a new iteration of it, and then we'll touch on it with our NOFA reform, but essentially this will be new. So what we've done in the past has taught us a lot. This is a new type of funding for us. And then we also got $4 million for PSH Risk Mitigation Fund, knowing that there's a lot of insurance issues with our PSH properties. That's permanent supportive housing. And then lastly, we got $450 million in PAB resources per calendar year for additional bond allowances as well. So that's for the
Tanisha.
Development. Yes.
PAB is?
Oh, yes, private activity bonds. So it's funding that I'm still trying to wrap my brain around, but essentially bonds we sell to get immediate funding so that we can allocate more funding for our affordable housing developments. So those are all things that we thought were coming, were hoped for coming. We didn't know the exact amounts. Everything else on the right, we did not know was coming, is from the legislature and their creative brains. So that's $10 million for in-community ag worker housing, $20 million for a new modular housing grant fund, which we'll talk about in a little bit, $20 million for the Affordable Housing Loan Guarantee Fund, and $3 million for selling publicly supported housing to regain or extend affordability. So that's an overview of the affordable rental housing. The next slide will go over our housing stabilization. I won't read all this. It's a lot of money and a lot of different things, but essentially it's a lot of the emergency order stuff, a lot of housing stabilization stuff we've already done, but a lot of money with it. So this is a big slide with a lot of information. So we got $349.6 million, and then on top of that, if we go to the next slide, we got an additional $46.1 million in addition to that big funding chart that I showed you. So this came both in the early session package and the end of session package. And these are things like $5 million for tribal homelessness response. And then we got an additional $5 million for the same response in the end of session package. We got $5 million in the early housing account funds to provide services for youth experiencing homelessness. And then in the end of session package, we got 24.1 to extend our ability to do Project Turnkey and Navigation Centers funding, which were one-time investments in the 2019 to 21 biennium and then the 2021 to 23 biennium. We have $6 million to various organizations to help provide eviction defense. Then we have $1 million for our emergency housing account funds to provide services for pets for those who are experiencing homelessness and didn't have a place for their pet to go.
Tanisha, can I stop
So
you
the
for just
next-
a quick
yeah.
section?
Yeah.
This is a lot of money, and I assume it's gonna take a while for you all to roll it out. Can you give us an
Yes.
idea as you're talking about whether, you kind of said new program, existing program, any idea of timeline when these funds will actually become available for our communities and how we would know that and where we would reach
Yes.
in for them? Because this
Yes.
is a lot, and I think one of our goals in having you all here today and having this conversation was to queue ourselves up to be ready to seek
Yeah.
these funds and utilize these funds in a county that has a very limited capacity to stay on top of the many NOFAs and things that may be coming
Yeah.
out of OHCS. So thank you.
Of course. So housing stabilization, their funding, a lot of it is a lot more dollars, and emergency order stuff was set up in a certain way. These dollars most of the dollars that we're talking about where y'all can get access to will be out shortly. I have a link for a sign up at the end of the slideshow that I'll drop in the chat when I'm done talking and Kim takes over, just so everyone has access on the chat as well. But you can sign up for that, and that's where we'll notify people when funding resources are available in all these programs. And I'll touch on it in a little bit, but essentially House Bill 5019 and all the funding that was there, this one, and then we'll go back to a slide that has it in a second. All of that has been expended, but that was emergency order counties. Now we're getting into the bigger picture for EO homelessness response. That money will be moving out shortly. We're still tweaking and finalizing things, but that should be going soon. And then I can drop the link to make sure y'all know which topic to sign up for to know when that will actually come out. So I'll make sure to include that in the next ones. If we go to home ownership, so the bond allocations that I was talking about earlier, the 600 millions and 11 Q bonds, again, LIFT homeownership, LIFT rental, and permanent supportive housing. Then we also got $5 million for LIFT homeownership so that those dollars can go specifically to rural communities and support those applications. Then we have $7.5 million for down payment assistance, 2.5 for replacing of manufactured homes, which is a really important part of our affordable home ownership stock. Then 7.5 for a new low-income mortgage loan fund ran by NOAA, and 2.5 for foreclosure avoidance counseling. So now I'll dive into where we are in money, money that is being spent or is actively out there about to go out the door. So as I said, emergency homeless response funding, everything in yellow has been spent. But again, that was the emergency order, so you haven't missed anything. Those are for those MAC groups in those counties. But with the same urgency and the same fervor, our agency is looking to move the rest of the funds. And I will make sure you have where that information will lie and updates will occur. Linked in the PowerPoint, but I'll also drop it in the chat. So the next slide will kind of show what our goals are with the early funding and the funding that we're going to try to get out the door soon. We're trying to create 600 new shelter beds and rehouse 1,200 households by January 10th. So these are the 5 House Bill 5019 funds, and these are emergency order fund communities. So again, this is just the initial thing. We're about to do more, and as soon as I have that information where it's public, I'll make sure y'all have it. But on the next slide, this is the next thing that's coming out, is House Bill 2001 and House Bill 2889 implementation. This bill was the omnibus housing bill, and it was part of the early session package with House Bill 5019. So what this bill did, the big thing initially, is it codified ONA, which I'm sure DLCD talked a lot about. DLCD with DAC and OHES will be working on implementing this. Then it also expanded the use of emergency housing account for addressing youth homelessness, and it extended timelines related to non-payment of evictions. So both of those things are related to the emergency order and were codified in statute and expanded. Then we have the establishment of the one-time modular housing fund investment, which I'll get to in a second. And then it established the moderate income housing pre-development loan program. This is $3.6 million that were given to the Treasury, State Treasury Department, and they will be doing that one. And then the grants for on-farm agriculture for like fixing things up and making it go well, they got $5 million. That's in the Department of Ag. So all of these things are the first things that will be moving and will be things people can go after, but we only have a couple of the things on here. So where we are right now with our implementation, and the thing that's furthest ahead other than the emergency order, next slide, will be the modular housing development fund. So I encourage you, if you have community members that are in modular housing manufacturing or anything like that, you might ping them to sign up for the alerts that I'll put in the chat. So what this is it's from House Bill 2001 and then updated into House Bill 2889. It is a one-time fund of $20 million to allocate for grants for modular firms. The legislative intent of this is a little different than what OHS normally does, but it's spurring the capacity and the economic development of modular housing industry in Oregon. So in the bill, there is an order of priority that they are requiring if you get funds from this program, that you have to prioritize state and local governments after natural disasters, low-income housing, and middle-income housing. So the next slide will show what we've done so far. Right now, we've created a framework, and what that framework does is we get approval from stakeholders, legislature, and the governor's office to move forward with our request for application to essentially ask people to apply for these funds. So our broad thoughts, this is not in stone. The request for application is what will be true. That is the reality of the situation. This is our thoughts moving into it. But essentially, if we have $20 million, we think 3 to 5 grants, roughly $5 million each. That seems fair. That seems useful. From our stakeholder involvement, that was kind of the number a lot of people were thinking that's a fair number. So what they can use this funding for are things like equipment purchases, infrastructure expansion, and design standards. Can do a lot of things. Other than that, there's a lot of flexibility there, but that's our overall thought. And how we'll score an applicant when they want these funds. How much are you gonna produce more? Because this is about expanding capacity. So what is your projected output if you get funding? And then can you prioritize the statutory requirements and their readiness for investment? So those are overarching what we're thinking about with these funds. The next slide.
Excuse me, I'm just curious really quickly, does that include funding eligibility for increasing staffing?
There have been a lot of conversations about that. Where the RFA will specifically stand, I'm not sure. I know that our team wanted that. So we still have to go through procurement and DOJ and get approval, but we do understand that staffing up is an extremely important part of being able to increase production. So
A similar question, could it be used
Yes.
for training and development of the staff?
I believe that it could be. I think, again, the RFA is going to be what actually matters, and since it's not finalized, I cannot speak to that. But these are things we have heard about and have been open-minded to. Essentially, when we're thinking about this is brand new for OHS. This is different than what we normally do. We want to give flexibility to the experts. We're not the experts in modular housing. We want to make sure that the companies who are boots on the ground can get the work done, have the flexibility as we're putting this together to use funds effectively, because who are we to say what is most effective? They know better than us. So both of those things are things we've considered.
Tanisha,
So,
I'm going to jump in actually. I'm curious if there is, I didn't realize there's a modular manufacturer in Tillamook County, but it would be helpful to hear, when you're asking questions, are you thinking of a particular business, and to share that with us so that we make sure that we know about that business and can, make sure that we're including them in outreach opportunities and so forth.
Yeah, Kim, I'm not aware of one. We've had one individual who's interested in starting something like that, but with nothing that is currently active to the best of my knowledge.
It's good. He's trying to bring it on to be active. He has had a project not in Oregon that has been successful and is trying to bring his product here, and we are working to see if it's a possibility. But as soon as we kind of clear the viability stage of that, I'll be sure to put you in contact with him.
Well, and I think I sent him information to participate in your sessions that you did with modular developers. So I think he may be connected already, but we'll confirm.
Do you guys have
Perfect.
Do you all have a summary of your work on the modular housing industry somewhere, like your stakeholder engagement?
We have a summary. We have not been allowed to go external with it because essentially since we are putting out a request for application, if we give any unfair advantage to anyone who wanted to apply, that makes our implementing of this not okay.
Can you ask if you can share it with Nate? You ask if you can share it with I'm curious.
Yes, because other people in your office have been involved in the broad office of yours, so I'll make sure you get it. I know I can send it to you. So,
He's got to have friends in the governor's office.
Well, to be fair, I will not share it externally, but I was just bugging one of Melanie's colleagues about Melanie has colleagues about this industry and what Business Oregon is thinking about it, so it sounds like OHCS was thinking about it. So.
Yeah, we got this. The legislature decided this was housing, so it came to us. So it's been fun to learn about a new thing. But essentially, the big thing from the legislature was they wanted this money out yesterday. As many of you know, government cannot move at the speed of lightning, and we didn't get access to this funding until July 1. And then we also had to wait. There's some tweaks in House Bill 2889 that we needed in order to make this more smooth, and so we had to wait on all of that to get signed by the governor. So as soon as that happened.
Sorry, can I ask one more question about this?
Yeah.
Does it have to go to an Oregon company? The reason I ask is there is I don't know if they're considered a modular home manufacturer, but a tiny home manufacturer, whatever, Wolf Industries in Battleground, Washington, that could supply a lot of Oregon. So just curious if it could extend beyond our borders.
It's for Oregon only for the statute. So,
But if they want to locate somewhere in Oregon, we're happy to
that
chat
is
with
true.
them.
If they wanted to begin production here, that is in the statute. They're beginning production here. So we held in multiple engagement sessions, individual and with larger stakeholder groups. And that's where a lot of our understanding of this industry came from, is a lot of that stakeholder feedback and what they said would work or wouldn't work. So in order, we did the framework, we got the idea vetted. So now we had to go to Oregon's Housing Stability Council. We went in September, and they charged OHCS to consider ways to expand equity considerations in deploying funds. So we're currently researching what that looks like, and we'll hopefully go back in the next month or two to get things finalized. We will not be there at tomorrow's meeting to finalize this. If you want to go to the next slide, this is where we are now in regards to this one. And so we are in drafting stage for the request for application. That's what the framework kind of gives us an idea of what we want. We need to get our framework approved by Housing Stability Council. We're actively doing rulemaking. We're hopefully going to have our request for application released as soon as everyone says you're good to go. So we're trying to push this out the door as soon as possible. Then applicants will apply and funds will be awarded. So this is an example. I wanted to deep dive. This is an example of one of our fastest. We've been able to implement a new program at OHCS. What is currently happening with everything else I mentioned, all those millions of dollars other, we are currently in implementation stage. So every division is working closely with the governor's office, with stakeholders, with legislators to make sure that we know what the legislative intent is, we know what they wanted us to do, and we also have a certain number of staff. We're trying to balance staff time, staff pressures, and make sure we can implement everything as efficiently as possible, but we also can't do it all at the same time. So at the end of the slideshow, which, Kim, you don't need to go there, I'm just letting y'all know, there's a summary materials. What that has, it has legislative highlights of all the things that I just shared, a little bit more deeper. It has a digest that has every bill related to housing that was brought, and it's 700 pages long, so just let you, it's a lot, or 100 and something pages long. I'm now confused myself, but there's a lot of bills. So if you were like, did someone have this slot? Check there. They may have. See what happened to that bill. And then our government relations team, we keep posting lots of updates, so it has that thing. What Kim is talking about in a second, it has her page, her web page on there as well. And lastly, it has a sign up online link. It has, and then on that link, you can sign up for any of the things you're super focused on or super interested in. That's where all of the updates on when funding will be available and how it will be available will come out. And then I'll drop my email in the chat at any point. If you hear, I was signed up for this, but I didn't get this notice, please email me. And then that way I make sure you're on the right list, or if we messed up, I can get you the info as soon as possible. But that sign up list is crucial. That will be the fastest way to know when things are out. But I'll drop that on the chat and I will pass things over to Kim.
And just quickly, since many of us are in the room, Parker, will you pick that up from chat and distribute it for us? Thank you.
It won't make it in the chat,
Yeah,
by the way.
We
Yeah.
have no, we
Oh.
do not have a chat function.
Oh,
If you,
that's right.
if you could
Oh,
email it
that's
to
good to
me,
know.
if you could email it
Yep.
to me, I will delineate it out.
Hey, can I ask,
Perfect, I will make sure that happens.
can I ask one more question on the modular housing front?
Yes.
Are you all engaged with, the regional development officer team at Business Oregon on this?
We have worked with Business Oregon a little bit, but since we had some initial meetings, but since we had to get the funding out the door quickly, we had those initial meetings, learned a lot, and then we moved forward with that. So we worked with their experts on how to do economic development and how to set up a procurement and a request for application in that regard.
Sure, I think that might be a really good route to try to get this information and get applicants out into the world, since I know, they hear from them. Modular
Yeah.
housing manufacturers on a pretty regular basis in one way or another, so.
That is true. They're quite an active community. I like it a lot. We've been meeting a bunch of people.
I do have a follow-up.
Thanks, Tanisha.
I do have a follow-up question in regard to the legislative packages.
Yeah.
Was there anything
Mhm.
focused on middle housing as far as like the middle income ranges? Because that is also something that we've found that has been lacking.
So this past session, that has not come out to fruition. Those conversations are actively happening. We as an agency have been part of those conversations. I would definitely keep an eye on and advocate. It looks like February might be the day, because a lot of people are having this conversation, and what that looks like, I have no idea. I'm not the expert. Middle income is definitely a big step, because it's a different kind of income and different kind of funding would be necessary, but those conversations are happening. It just has not happened yet.
And
Officially.
Can you clarify, does your organization, would you have anything to do with any middle income or workforce housing? Or is that like statutorily not in your wheelhouse?
As of right now, it's not within our wheelhouse without some very minor exceptions. We're allowed to do some mixed income now because of some legislative work we did. What those conversations have been is what would need to change statutorily or rule-wise that prevents OHCS from doing middle income. There are also, depending what our funding resources are, different bonds and different things require different AMI requirements. So different federal funding would not be able to be expended or expanded to middle income, but that doesn't mean new funding wouldn't be able to go to middle income.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Because there is one thing you mentioned in the slide about 2001 and 2889. You talked about a program going to Treasury, established a moderate income housing pre-development loan fund. Is that the one that's going to Treasury, or is that?
Yes.
And is that, am I reading moderate as being sort of that up to 120 range?
That is what we've been told, but I don't want to speak for another agency on how they're implementing that. So that very much is in their wheelhouse. I don't want to speak to that. So that would most likely be middle income, but I don't, since it's a different term language, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth and speak wrong on that one.
What bill? 2889, I assume?
Yeah, I believe House Bill 2001. I don't think it had 2889 updates at all.
I don't know that any of you that are on this call necessarily have the right audience for this suggestion, but it would seem to me that the nature of funding for workforce housing ideally would be a little bit more nimble and less government entangled. So I don't know if there's a way to identify a public-private partner or some lending institution or some other means of getting that money out once it hopefully does get designated by the legislature. But it's in high demand, speaking on behalf of a healthcare organization employing 500 people and having difficulty recruiting medical professionals to the community because of our lack of housing and the fact that they don't qualify for any of the housing that we just looked at in this really great presentation. So just putting a plug in there on behalf of my role. Yep. Thank you.
Of course. I would encourage you, I don't know if the HPAC has heard this yet, but I know they're considering middle income. If there's opportunities for public comment, definitely let them know, especially in regards to more nimbleness, because Oregon Housing has a lot of other, like, we're a very proactive agency. We have a lot of big goals. And so just encouraging you, if that's your goal, if you want it to be more nimble, make sure that part of your voice is also heard, because middle income is needed. A lot of people are talking about that, but how much regulation we put around that, that's being less talked about. So I would encourage you to reach out to the HPAC and share those concerns. And I believe Senator Anderson is on HPAC, and I know he values the coastal voice quite well. So maybe emailing him or reaching out to his staff. He knows this, he talks about this, but it doesn't hurt if he has written proof of other people's thoughts as well. So,
Thank you.
of course. Do you have any other questions before I pass it to Kim?
Okay. All right. Well, you can also ask questions as we go through here, and I'm going to be brief. As Nate mentioned, I have a new role at Oregon Housing and Community Services, and I'm focused on engagement in the affordable rental housing division. Formerly, I was in public affairs and was more broad and kind of a generalist across the agency, but I've transitioned to focus solely on affordable rental housing and the different funding sources that they have as they're working towards streamlining allocation and application processes. So we're in the middle of an engagement process right now. We launched a engagement process in the middle of August, targeted at our key audience really are the developers, affordable housing developers. They're the applicants for the majority of programs in the affordable rental housing division. So always talking to housing authorities, nonprofit developers, for-profit developers. They're the folks that are putting together applications and applying for the resources in the affordable rental housing division. So we've been engaging with them over the last 6 weeks or so as we're looking to consider new business models for allocating funding in line with Governor Kotek's Executive Order 2304 and the scale of resources that Tanisha was just talking about, and really trying to streamline and optimize these resources and quite frankly make it easier for developers to apply for these different sources of funding. Historically, with all of these different sources of funding, we'll have several different competitive application processes throughout the year. Often our development partners are unclear about which source of funding they should apply for, and when those competitive funding allocations will be available. And so we're engaging with the development community to build out a new process that will work for them and work for us to make sure that we're funding projects in a way that expedites, accelerates development as much as we can. We are looking, as I mentioned, to build out a more centralized application process instead of having 10 to 15 different competitive processes per year, to centralize into one application process. We are also looking at ways that we can work with developers on a development pipeline and have more engagement earlier in their process to develop these projects, so that we're in touch with them as they have a project concept, that we've got staff, as Tanisha mentioned. We have had limited staff, but we are staffing up right now and are planning to have earlier interventions and opportunities to engage with developers to help guide them and get them ready to apply for resources when we have our application process open. And along with that, we're really also looking to allocate funding to projects closer to when they're shovel ready. We have had times where projects, they receive a funding reservation from OHCS and then run into complications and their costs increase. And so it's difficult for us to then go back and try to reallocate funding to address those cost increases that occurred over, a span of 8 to 12 months. So we're trying to fund closer to shovel ready. And really talking to development partners, talking to the other lenders that are part of these projects, because a lot of these affordable housing projects have many sources of funding, not just Oregon Housing and Community Services, as well as they're working with private lenders. So we're really trying to look at our engagement with that in mind, and all of the different pieces that also need to line up for developers, looking at how we can streamline our policy objectives and again, make it a little clearer for folks that may not know the nuances of different accounts that the legislature has given us over the years. A lot of the new programs that we get, all of them have different policy priorities, they have different rules, and so again, this process is difficult for folks to really understand how their project fits and how does it fit within the priorities, and where and when and how do they apply. So we're really in earnest looking at how we can adapt our business model to achieve these objectives with our funding partners. So how to get involved, as Tanisha mentioned, this is my page that has all of the information about the engagement process that we're having a series of meetings. We have 2 meetings in October scheduled, one on the 12th and one on the 26th. We typically have 100 plus folks in those meetings, and we're talking about things like construction cost containment. We're talking about things like underwriting with the lenders and the requirements that lenders have, and making sure that we're aligning with that. We're talking about things like subsidy caps per unit, operating costs, and all of those things that developers need to work into their pro formas as they're putting these projects together. So we're tackling these items in our engagement session and getting lots of feedback from developers, lots of feedback, and also summarizing that feedback and the synthesis that we're hearing from this outreach. So that's all available on this website here. And then there's also surveys that we're asking some really specific questions of our development partners, so we can get that input and use that as we build out our new design. So that's how to get involved. And so where we're at, I already kind of alluded to with some of these upcoming topics. And we still have surveys on the concept of readiness. And so that's, how do we fund closer to shovel ready? That is a very hot topic. Our developers are very concerned that we're looking to change our criteria around readiness. So this is a very hot topic. We continue to get lots of input about that. And as well as pre-development, a concept of pre-qualification, where we would essentially keep on file an ongoing list of developers that are pre-qualified and keep that up to date. And also new diversity, equity, and inclusion agreements that we're looking to put in place. So we had these meetings, and we still are keeping the surveys open, as well as all the material on our website. You can view the recordings of the meetings. We've got discussion documents on there, PowerPoint presentations, a dearth of materials if you want to dig into these topics. We hope that you'll engage with us or recommend your development partners working in Tillamook County to engage with us. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions for me about the engagement process or Tanisha.
Thank you, Kim. I'll just jump in real quick and just, I had talked with Tim Lawler, who is the one that did the Willow Apartments, as well as Tom Kemper, and just made sure that they were aware and engaging, because I felt they could bring the coastal voice and what it really takes to develop here to those conversations. So, in terms
Great.
of our local developers engaging, I believe they have, which is good news.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and I did just want to also share for folks that are interested in that middle income or moderate income housing, we actually do have a program, but it's not a subsidy program. So we have a new loan guarantee program for housing to serve 0 to 120% of area median income. And don't ask me to share all the details about what a loan guarantee means, but essentially it's really for the financer, for the bank to feel comfortable in investing in the moderate income project, and provides a guarantee that if there is a foreclosure on the property, that the bank will get paid. So it's it's a different type of resource. It's not a subsidy for construction of the middle income or moderate income housing. It's essentially a level of comfort for the lender that if the project fails, they will be able to recoup their investment in that property. So I am happy to send information to Parker. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I can send information to Parker about that. And I do think that for builders that are interested in that and working in that middle income space, it's great to have a conversation with the lenders that they're also working with to see if this is a tool that would be of interest and would help make that deal more attractive for that private financing. So I'll send it to Parker and then feel free to distribute it to folks working on that middle income housing in your community.
So Kim, is that active now? You said it was new, but is that active and up and running?
No.
So we have an active, we do have an active loan guarantee that's available and has been available. But we have the new one that the legislature enabled is the construction. So it's on the construction loan that the builder would get. Thinking, that's a very risky part of the development, during the construction phase. And so offering that to lenders who may be hesitant to get involved in a deal. So if they can look at their construction loan, and if a guarantee would be useful to help put that financing together. And then we do have the permanent loan guarantee as well. So when that project moves to permanent financing, they can also look at bringing that guarantee in to their permanent financing.
For updates on that one, I'm about to send the email to Parker. I would encourage, I'm sending you a whole list of what I think you might want to sign up alerts for. Rulemaking notice will be probably the fastest thing that you'll see relating to that program, because we'll need rulemaking changes, and then most likely the affordable rental housing technical advisories of when that part of the program. So it's we're combining it, but that specific part, we do have to change some rules before we can do it. So I would encourage you to do rulemaking notices as one of your checked boxes. I would like to know more about that. And so I'll send this to Parker, but I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any questions. So I have a whole list of things to send y'all guys.
Thank you. I think that will be a tool that will be useful because we're giving away our own funds here, and we're giving away funds for those up to 120%. So we're really trying to put together a toolbox that includes what we have locally, and this could be a partner. We definitely have had some conversations where the financer was nervous. This could be a really great tool. I think about Kevin and Katie's project, and the financer was just nervous, right? And we talked them through it, but
Yeah, a lot of this middle income housing is being developed by non-developers. They're
Yeah.
just good people that happen to have land or resources and want to be part of the solution. And they don't have the cash flow to stand these projects up. And it's really disappointing when somebody sticks their neck out that is doing this out of the kindness of their heart and they just hit one barrier after another and there really aren't any resources that we've been aware of. We've been trying to help them as much as we can, but this could be a game changer for a couple of our current development projects.
And I'd also like to add that you mentioned that you're really getting good at streamlining the process for developers to come in and apply for these. And if there's any information I could get to help apply that to our process to make it even easier for those folks too, at the same time, we should be able to really lower the barriers here. If you guys have good information that could help me, I would love to help or see that.
Yeah, so our engagement process, we are looking to kind of wrap that up November 9th, and we have to build a product by the end of the year because we're looking to launch this new application process in 2024. So that's kind of where we are in the timeline. So we're looking to get as much input as we can right now to help shape the development of this product that we will roll out. So I'd love to talk more about how the OHCS application process can support and dovetail with your local process as well. And maybe we could have a one-on-one chat, Parker, about just kind of timeline and things that are part of that application process. And are there things that would be useful to, just exchange process, streamlining ways. So thanks.
I look forward to it.
So if there aren't other questions, I would just like to give OHCS some kudos here. So I've been working with OHCS for a long time, and the process changes that OHCS has gone through in the last few years to really be, I'm going to call it customer focused. I don't know if that's the right way to look at it, but as they are getting resources, they are doing so much work to make sure that they understand what the needs are in our communities. What our needs are in our communities, how they can work with us, how they can make this happen fast. I so many kudos because I know that the wheels of government turn slowly and that, I experience it at my level and the state experiences 10 times more at their level and they are really doing monumental work. So even though it may feel like, gosh, don't we have it yet, the work they're doing is monumental and the speed with which they are getting funds out really is exceptional. So I just want to thank you all for that. I know that it's a lot of work and it really has been a culture change that I've experienced at OHCS over the last probably 8 years. I'm somewhere in that timeline, but you all are doing great work. So thank you for that.
Thank y'all.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming and presenting to us. And does anyone have any final comments or questions?
So are we going to hear from Business Oregon?
Just giving them a chance to finish up.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Let me see if I can share my screen.
We see your desktop. Oh, now we see ourselves.
Okay, wrong screen.
I know sometimes you don't know what's happening in the room. There we go.
You don't want to see my desktop. It's frightening.
It's very busy.
Who among us?
Okay, are you seeing my slide deck? Okay. Yes, I can't hear you, or I can't see you.
The presentation format is probably not what you want. It's showing your side versus the full screen.
Oh, let's see. Hang on. Yeah. Why can't I fix this?
I think there's a box to click for presenter view that's somewhere up in your taskbar.
Oh, it's here and it's clicked. Oh, I know. Let me see. It's on my other screen. So, see if I can, for some reason it's using two screens. Well, I think we're just gonna have to work with it because it is what it is today. So sorry.
No worries, we can do that.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Melanie Olson, Regional Development Officer with Business Oregon and member of Regional Solutions team. And yes, so Nate asked me to come and just talk about a few of the resources available at Business Oregon for housing development. And as you all probably know, housing is not our primary mission, but creating and retaining family wage jobs is. And so we don't have dedicated programs to housing development, but we do have infrastructure programs that we've been using for some housing projects and has worked quite well. So I'm just going to touch on a few. Obviously, you're seeing PowerPoints are not my specialty, but I did throw something together since Nate asked me to do that. And I'm going to just go through here. So what I want you to remember is that we basically have a couple of funds, and this one, the Special Public Works Fund, is the easiest one by far to use and has seemed to be the most popular. It is a loan program funded through state lottery bonds. It is a revolving loan fund program. You must have publicly owned infrastructure, so we can't do laterals or service lines, but we can do transmission mains, stormwater, streets, sidewalks, lighting, all of the things that would go into serving that housing development that's owned by an eligible public entity, which could be a city or a county or a water sewer district as examples.
Can I ask,
The maximum.
can I ask a question there real quick? So like right now, the county just bought a piece of property that needs all of that, but we will ultimately be selling it off for a developer to build housing on it. So when you say it has to be a public entity, we own it right now and we want to set it up for easy development. Our job, we feel, is to make it as shovel ready as possible. Do we qualify for this in order to do that work, given that eventually we're going to sell it to a private developer?
So the utilities will remain publicly owned, I would imagine, right? So any new capacity that has to be, enhanced as part of that development would remain in public ownership. So as long as it remains in public ownership through the life of the loan, then it would be eligible. If you just developed the infrastructure and then sold the site as is, then you'd have to pay that loan off when you sell the property. But I would just maybe caution you too, and think about how. So keep in mind, these are public dollars through the state or the federal government, which trigger things like prevailing wage and Davis-Bacon. And Bureau of Labor and Industries is the government agency that determines whether a project is subject to prevailing wage or Davis-Bacon. And it's been our experience that if you're trying to do the whole project at once, the housing and the infrastructure, that's viewed as a public improvement and therefore subject to prevailing wage. And then the entire housing project becomes subject to, which makes that unpalatable for developers. One way that communities have worked with that is to just go ahead and install the infrastructure in advance of any sort of development plans. And that way there is a separation of activities. So the county could develop the infrastructure now, take out a loan, sell that property, provided that that infrastructure continues with the county or the service provider.
Thank you.
Does that help? Okay.
Yeah, that helps.
Okay. So the maximum loan amount, $10 million. And the two communities that have used this program so far are John Day and Hermiston. And I want to advance here. So this is a picture of the Hermiston development. And the way this worked is that the city of Hermiston's Urban Renewal Agency worked with the city to apply for a loan from Business Oregon using the tax increment financing as the loan repayment source. And so they actually took out almost a $10 million loan that is paying for the infrastructure and public spaces that will remain city-owned and serviced. And then that tax increment financing, of course, pays the debt service. And as the property develops, that tax increment financing pool increases. And so it's a really great model, and it seems to be working well for them. So they're partnering with a developer who this is the developer's plans, and then the city is separately through the URA installing those utilities. The other project then is John Day, and the key here again is just partnership with the developer and using that urban renewal agency as the source of the loan repayment. So that's Special Public Works. It's easy to access. We have funding generally all of the time. It's a simple pre-application process followed by application. It is tax exempt financing for public entities. You can access it by reaching out to me, and I can help walk you through that application process. So, provided we have funding, you are eligible, and the project's eligible. Then the next program is, there's actually 3 under Brownfield. So we have Brownfield Redevelopment Fund, there's a Properties Revitalization Fund, and then Cleanup Funds. And these are all administered by Karen Homelak at Business Oregon, who I think many of you probably know. All 3 are primarily revolving loan funds, but there are some grants to do assessment and planning on a brownfield site. So whether it's real known contamination or perceived contamination, there is a carve out of that fund to do some of those phase 1, phase 2s that might be needed in order to help a project move forward. It's primarily available to public entities, but there is a provision in one of the programs that allows for private entities to then be reimbursed for costs incurred necessary to assess or mitigate for that contamination. We've used this fund, this brownfield redevelopment, on a couple of projects. One was in Astoria. Brett will remember the Merwin Hotel. They had ran into, I think it was asbestos at the time, but they ran into some issues during construction that we were then able to help reimburse them for, which was a big benefit for the developer. So that one is unique. It can be used after the fact or after construction starts. All of our other programs, you have to have the funding secured before you start the project. Really, there's some nuances to this financing that, if you're interested at all, I would reach out to Tiffany Johnson, who is our new Brownfield coordinator, or Karen, and ask some questions. But just know there is planning, assessment, and cleanup dollars, some grants, some loans for a variety of projects with an emphasis on housing projects. Housing and business development are really priorities, and there's special provisions for communities that are determined to be disadvantaged, which of course Tillamook is. Other communities in the Tillamook County area may not be, so we'd have to look at each project as it comes. Any questions about that? Okay, I will send you this brownfield, there's 3 fact sheets, and I was going to put them in the chat, but I wasn't able to do that. So I would be happy to send them to Parker to get them to you, and there's some useful information that I think if you wanted to evaluate this as an opportunity, you could do that using these resources. So the last program at Business Oregon is the Community Development Block Grant. And I will just say this program comes with a huge warning sign. And the county, I think, is familiar with some of the challenges of using what we call CDBG is the acronym. And the reason it's challenging is it comes to Business Oregon through the Housing and Urban Development Department, and it is very prescriptive in the types of projects and the communities that it will serve. Right now, there is nothing in CDBG that allows for housing infrastructure. However, we are in the process of making changes to what's called the method of distribution, which determines how the state uses those funds, to add a category for off-site infrastructure. So, none of these programs that I mentioned can fund the actual housing projects, but they can all be used for the planning and construction of the utilities needed to serve those sites. Under CDBG, the community benefiting and or the development benefiting must meet the national objective of serving primarily, which means 51% or more, of low and moderate income populations. And that low and moderate income populations is determined through the Census Bureau. The data is updated annually, and currently the city of Tillamook qualifies as a low moderate income community. The city of Wheeler qualifies, but those are the only two in Tillamook County that, as a community, would be eligible. Otherwise, you would have to limit the development to only those populations or those folks that are 51% low mod income, which creates a host of challenges, right? Because you have to have, if the county was interested in sponsoring an application to extend infrastructure to a site for a housing project, you would have to have a development agreement with that developer that limits those units to 51% indefinitely. There's no sunset on it. And then you have to collect income data and all of these other things. So that's why the big warning sign. It's just, there's a lot to it. The funds are available through a competitive quarterly application process, and we expect the first round of funding to be come about in 2024, and it will likely be summer of 2024 because it takes HUD quite some time to get us the funds, quite honestly, but you will need those 6 months to put together your application. It is quite rigorous. Fortunately, we have great partners at Colpack who've been helping communities not only apply for those funds, but then also administer them on the back end because, as I mentioned, there's a lot to it. Some other just notes about CDBG is that no other properties can benefit from the public improvements. What that would mean is if you're going to use this funding to increase the capacity of the sewer main, you would have to demonstrate that you would only be benefiting that new housing development. So you couldn't serve other houses along that line. It would basically have to terminate at that development. And that's really not ideal. But it can work in some situations. And then the funding can be used for the design, construction, rehabilitation, and installation of any publicly owned and operated utilities. And I want to just emphasize the operated part. There's been a lot of discussion, and in the John Day project in the Hermiston, what they're doing there is they're including broadband service. But under the CDBG program, you would not be able to include broadband conduit in that extension unless you were actually the city or the county or another public entity such as WAVE. Is it WAVE?
Tillamook Lightwave. We haven't had
Tillamook Lightwave. Tillamook Lightwave was the provider of that service. So it's heavily nuanced, not easy to use, not easy to access, but it is a great resource, and it is a grant. It's 100% grant, so it can be beneficial where these other programs are loans. Let's see.
Did you say how much? Did you say what those grants were? I'm sorry, my brain was trying to figure out how to use it already.
Yeah, no, we don't, go back, sorry. No, we do not have a maximum on the offsite infrastructure just yet because it's still being worked out through the development of the method of distribution and then the public comment period. So that is to be determined.
Okay.
And that program too, keep in mind, you are competing with other projects around just basic water sewer development, not increased capacity, but replacing old facilities, Head Starts, senior centers, food banks, those types of projects are all eligible for this limited pot of funds, which technically or generally is anywhere between $10 and $15 million per year. There is, actually, I'm going to stop sharing because, whoops, if I can get there 1 second. There is one other program that I thought of after I put together this really quick slideshow, and it is the Land Bank Authority, which is not a funding program per se, but it was created by the legislature in 2015, and it basically creates a separate entity, legal entity, that can acquire, redevelop, sell brownfield properties for a variety of uses. And Clackamas County was the first community that attempted to use it. I tried to get an update this morning on how that's going for them. Where a tool like this might be useful is if there was a property in the county, and I'm thinking of one in Garibaldi, that we know is a brownfield, has historic contamination, but is important to that community in terms of controlling the future of that, or maybe it's an ideal property for a housing development, and there's a risk that that property could be acquired for something less desirable. The Land Bank Authority can actually purchase that property, hold it, clean it up, and avoid the liability that comes with owning a contaminated property. And then, of course, as a public entity under the Land Bank Authority, you would be eligible for a variety of funds that a private developer wouldn't. And if that is something that's of interest to the Housing Commission, there's some experts in the state that could come and talk about land bank authorities and how they work. There's information on the website or on the web about those. And it seems like a really neat tool, and I would love to see it implemented somewhere in the region, but so far have not. And then just in closing, to Parker's point, I would say with all of these housing projects in the county and the region, just keep in mind the value of regional solutions and our ability to help expedite permits and, working through DEQ, working through Brett and DLCD. That is where the value of the team lies, is being able to just help shepherd some of those through the process, because while we may not have subsidized financing for some of these projects, sometimes the value is in a streamlined permitting process where you can save time and money, and that's maybe more valuable than other things. And I think about things like construction financing, and when that construction takes longer than intended, and then you all of a sudden are in a situation where interest rates are rising, having an expedited permitting process, it can be incredibly valuable. So I will end that there and answer any questions.
So Melanie, we keep hearing that the Infrastructure and Jobs Act had all this money that was supposed to come through the clean water programs and things that will come to the state and eventually come out to community. Is that going to be, who does that at the state, the clean water program?
So for sewer, it's DEQ, and all of the federal funds will flow through existing programs, and that would be the DEQ State Revolving Loan Fund. And for drinking water, that is a partnership between Business Oregon and Oregon Health Authority through all our sister program, which is also the State Revolving Loan Fund. And those programs are primarily to address the provision of safe drinking water and clean water treatment. They're generally not for capacity building, though there are ways you can incorporate some increased capacity as part of an improvement project or a pump station rehabilitation. But it really, I think, Commissioner, that if you were interested in talking more about that, I can sit down with you and talk about it and how you would structure an application. DEQ has project officers that can also walk you through it. I did not include information about those programs in this slide deck because they're really not intended to serve new housing developments. But if that new housing development is part of a greater rehabilitation project that's already planned and in a community's capital improvement plan, then it can be included in unique situations.
Is that money here? Has it arrived? Is it available?
Yes. So Business Oregon, it's coming, I think it's in 3 different tranches, and I believe that DEQ is receiving it in the same way. So we received our first allocation and it was about $20 million. We will receive another one in, I think it's 2024 and then 2025. So over the long term, it's, for Business Oregon, it's around, I believe, 60 million, and I don't know how much DEQ is getting. And it's awesome, but also keep in mind, 60 million statewide is not a ton of money. So we have to be really thoughtful and prioritize the neediest communities and those that have, I guess, the worst conditions, if you will. But I'd be happy to talk with you. If there's a development project you have in mind, let's chat about it.
I see that Melissa's on the line. I don't know, Melissa, not to put you on the spot.
Oh, Melissa, we're gonna put you on the spot.
Do you have any information on the DEQ, the wastewater piece of this?
No, not right now.
Okay, we can follow up with you on that.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, because we know that we have some of our cities who have very significant issues related to this that are not about a specific development. They're just about all of the city itself. We have one city that's already done a development moratorium, I believe, in part of their city, and we have another one that is considering that, I believe. So and we have all been saying there's all this federal money, so we realize it may not, solve the whole problem, but they're going to have to get bites of this solution from a variety of resources, and we certainly don't want to miss that one because it came and went without it hitting the radar of the right people at the right time. So thank you, I appreciate the information.
I think, I just want to underline a little bit what Melanie said, and I'm like trying to think about how to do it and not be a downer. But like the federal money was like very much lauded, but like everyone in this room understands how much these capital projects are costing these days is like one huge component of this, and then like the overwhelming need from just over time. Like I think we all had really high hopes for our new deal, and I don't think it's gonna be a new deal, right? It's going to be maybe slightly more beneficial terms to some folks and go to maybe the most
I'm curious
communities
about that process. So having served before on the Northwest Act, there was a criteria-based, need-based decision-making process. Is that
most
in play
of
here?
the
'Cause
most of this money is not discretionary in that way, right? So models like regional solutions in the act were when the state and other folks had places where those were like mostly like state funds or that came in, and there was some regional decision making that you could do around them. Most of this money is coming from the feds and going into pre-existing programs, Business Oregon and DEQ, where community can call a one-stop, bring all the funding agencies to the table and talk about financing and grant options available for their projects. So, and it's based on formulas and spreadsheets and time immemorial. Am I getting this right, Melanie?
You are.
There's some like particular programs that are really need based that but it's like very, very, very few of those. But it's all of it is going through pre-existing funding channels. And there's some like of the federal programs that we're gonna trust Colin and his crew to make sure we're getting information on. Like folks up in Clatsop just got a huge brick allocation from FEMA. I don't know what USDA is looking like these days, but the one stop includes USDA. So it's unfortunately not like I've got this amount of money I can give to you in the region, and like you can tell us where you want it to go. It's City of Tillamook, after we talked to them on November 2nd, go and call one stop and yeah.
Would you encourage other cities to, because I know City Bay City previously had one-stop meetings and found that very effective. Would you encourage other cities to take advantage of that?
Well, it's a great tool. It's 100% a great tool for accessing existing financing programs. And I just want people to be prepared, that the answer is gonna be like, well, maybe you get a 5% interest rate instead of a 7%, or like, maybe we're able to extend those projects a little bit further and fund more people on our list, but it's not, unless you go get some congressionally directed spending, it's not just gonna be, you know, like, free gobs of money, unless Colin works some magic, so, Colin, the pressure's on you. I will say, just on a note on the infrastructure front, there are some fun things coming online around housing. I think it's out with some stakeholders, so I'll mention it here, but I'll ask folks to sort of, I don't know how public and out there in the world is, Commissioner Scar, I don't even know, the governor's got a housing package
Yeah.
that's talking about some of these funding pots, including plussing up a special public works fund. One that is near and dear to my heart, since I've like run at it 4 times, is the Immediate Opportunity Fund that lives between Business Oregon and ODOT. There's some idea of figuring out how it plays with housing. And then the really fun, the reason why I thought about it right now is talking about one-stops. It's the part of the housing package, like, it references one-stops, and I'm like, well, those exist, so, you know, but thinking about how we use those more as a tool maybe for housing conversations, I think is enshrined in part of that package. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, I've just received some very sketchy information where they said, what do you think about these general topics, and are these areas the right ones to look at? So that's all I've seen.
Yeah, and so there is some interesting stuff in there on infrastructure. There is some interesting stuff in there on middle income housing, and I've heard the governor talk about this out in different stretches of the state as well, so I don't know if it will be less governmenty. It'll probably be
Less governmenty.
I've coined a new word, I just want everybody to know, when you hear that, it was me.
Less governmenty.
It's a good blend.
I would just jump in, Commissioner. One of the things that we're hearing from communities is how challenging it is to just understand where the resources are and how to access them. And if you're a small city, if you're City of Wheeler, as an example, it is incredibly difficult to put together an application for something like Community Development Block Grant, even though you're eligible. But I think the way that a community can start is reaching out to either myself or Nate or another team member to start that conversation. And we also learned at the Infrastructure Summit last week that there are a number of technical assistance providers out there. There's free assistance through EPA. EPA is actually contracted with some consultants in Oregon to help them prepare things like income surveys, or look at financing options, or put together an application. There's some private technical assistance providers that can also help with some of that work that's needed. And so you could help us reach those communities by suggesting, they get in contact with us so that we can help walk them through some of the options, because it can be pretty overwhelming.
Thank you, I appreciate that, because I think part of the reason that we wanted to engage in this conversation with you all was that we're trying to, of course, find the ways that we can be the most helpful to our small cities, knowing that the majority of development that needs to happen in Tillamook County is unlikely to land in our unincorporated areas. So as the role of the Housing Commission, we've been working hard to create a developer-friendly environment and to support our cities who may not have capacity. And so this was a really great conversation, and even though what you may feel you've told us is no, there's not much, what you've told us is here's how we can focus and direct and work with our properly zoned areas to help them get where they need to go, because they all absolutely are engaged in being part of the solution, and we've promised to support them in that work. So from my perspective, I think this has been helpful. Housing commissioners?
Absolutely. I think it's been a great presentation.
Yeah, we
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, very much. Thumbs up from Ed.
Yep.
Just one more piece that Melanie talked about on the regulatory alignment, I won't call it streamlining or expediting. Expediting isn't a thing that happens, but yeah, please do reach out to us if developers are running into pieces. I know there's a lot of state highway here that can then create some extra process, and just talking to our housing policy advisor about a project up in Astoria where we're pulling ODOT to the table. Can't always say, can't rob ODOT to pay for housing always, but, so just keep us in mind. DSL, I know you have a few wetlands here.
Just a few.
Just a few, and a lot of those happen in the local process, but just keep us in mind as people are running into barriers.
Perfect, thank you. Colin, can I put you on the spot just for a moment? Colin is the new director of COPAC. I think he's been with us about a month, maybe? Something like that on the job. So I know that we did have Juliet Hyams there, who was doing some work directly with cities and other jurisdictions to try to help them get some of their projects into grants and that kind of thing. And I know that Juliet's time with the organization has ended. Is there any further information on how that program might be extended? And then my second question is, any guidance yet on the money that's coming for housing to the economic development organizations?
Good morning, Commissioner Scar. Yeah, three and a half weeks on the job and a lot of acronyms and funding sources. And with regard to the work that Juliet was doing, I think we're distributing that out to our remaining staff members. I know that Juliet made some good headway with a number of jurisdictions in Tillamook County, and we'll certainly continue to make all those efforts to connect people to funding opportunities, some of which you've heard today. And with regard to House Bill 3395 and the money that was allocated there for economic development districts and other COGS, that administrative rule making is still occurring, and I'm looking to reach out to some folks tomorrow or early next week to see if we've got any updates with regard to further details. So happy to report that out as soon as possible.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So COPAC is a key partner for us in the work that we can do. So I'm excited to have Colin on board and pleased that you could join us today. Hopefully you'll be able to join us again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Well, unless there's any further comment or questions about what we've done so far, I think we can start moving on to the rest of our meeting.
Okay.
And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, Kristen has her.
Kristen? Yes, Kristen has a question.
Thanks for having us.
I hope it's appropriate that I say this, but I don't want you guys to leave this meeting without being aware that the Housing Commission has its own multifamily rental housing fund currently open for applications, and it closes on November 6th. We have only about $400,000, which is about half of what we had last year. This is an established, successful program, and if we could get another $500,000, we could serve the same applicants and expand the capacity that we can offer with the same work process that's already underway. Last year, we supported 6 projects with something like 80-something units. Pretty good for a small amount of money. And this is workforce housing, which often includes affordable housing with long-term commitments. So if you're right there now and have some idea in your mind of how you can us a little bit of extra money, don't leave until you tell us. Be right there.
Her name is Senator Weber.
Yeah.
And we've been talking to her.
Yes.
Thanks for pointing that out, Kristen.
Melanie has money because she has her hand up.
Yeah.
I'm curious if any of the communities that you're working with have talked about creating an urban renewal agency or otherwise using that as a tool to help with the housing infrastructure.
Not that I'm aware of. That's a great question and one,
We have 2.
Parker's taking notes.
Yeah.
I know we have 2 in our county, urban renewal districts, but I'm not sure if any. It's a scary process. in the community as far as, tax increment financing, just as far as the administration and the debt process involved. But I don't know, and I guess it needs to prove successful. And that, I think that's something that our community hasn't really experienced on how successful that can be.
I think that our municipal, and I'm speaking, I'm sitting next to one, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the capacity to pursue some of these things is really the barrier. There's all of our agencies, and in general, I've worked in community well-being, and there's never enough qualified staff to really do the project coordination or administrative work to pursue some of these great ideas and funding opportunities. So that is a huge barrier, and one of the sad and ironic twists in that is we don't grow those kind of people in small rural communities. You have to bring them in from outside, and that requires housing, so and living wage jobs. So it's just this conundrum that we find ourselves in perpetually. I've been here almost 30 years, and this is just the nut we can't seem to crack.
I will put a quick plug in. The Oregon Economic Development Association is having their annual conference next week, and on Sunday they are having a session on urban renewal agencies and how those work. If you know of anyone who would be interested in listening in or even going to that conference, it is a great opportunity. I don't know if Terry Cooper is planning on going as your economic development director, but if you're interested, I can send you the conference agenda and just take a look. But Michelle, I think you're spot on. Brett actually is, Estes on the call, is actually very knowledgeable about urban renewal agencies and having set up a couple in the city of Astoria. And I have to think that if that is something that's of interest to a community, that we could pull together some resources to help make that happen. And I think about U of O's RARE program, where you bring in a graduate level student at a cost of about $25,000, and they're there for almost a whole year, helping bring capacity to communities. And if there was someone in the community that could, if there was interest and there was someone brought in that could help with that, I think there's some experts around the table and just in the network that could help make something like that happen and provide some education and tools. So just maybe a plug for the RARE program. Brad, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add about URA or other technical assistance resources for capacity building.
Yeah, no, nothing else to add, but if there were any questions about urban renewal districts, I'd be glad to have conversations. There once was an organization called the Association of Oregon Redevelopment Agencies, and back in the day, I was on the board of that agency before it got included in another economic development agency across the state. But I'd be glad just to chat about them and how they work, and if there were any local.
We lost you, Brad, at the end.
The owl just.
Oh,
The owl died?
Oh.
It went red.
That's where it's plugged in.
Can you still hear us online?
There we go.
Can you still hear us online? Yes, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Harper, I was just gonna put a plug in here while we're on the subject, and I'm glad Melanie brought it up, because I was thinking the same thing about like the local finance. Happy to help arrange some folks, and one person running this is Nick Green, who does some really interesting things around municipal finance out in John Day, and now he's got a consultancy.
Yeah, because what's forming in my head is some work that could be done probably by Parker. Thank you, Parker, for being here. That would look at what are all of these different opportunities for our cities, and then for us to be able to meet with the different cities and to be able to sort of say, here's, there's package of opportunities that might be available for you. And then I am thinking, since rulemaking's happening on the funding for the Economic Development District, maybe, just maybe if there's something in there that fits with there being a position at Colpack and other economic development districts, that could be part of what they help with. I have a post-it in my room, in my office, that says, if I don't have this capacity, can Colpack help me? Because it's one of the things that I've learned sitting on the Colpack board, right, is that, that's what, some of what they can do for us, is they can be that capacity sometimes, and that was around like the Brownsfields, which we do have a grant, but they also hold some capacity around CDBG, those kinds of things. Colpack can be the back office to a small city that doesn't have the capacity on their own at some levels. I can't commit Colin to everything, but this one occurs to me as an opportunity.
Thank you, Commissioner Scar. I think that's really true, and I appreciate you reminding everybody that Colpack is there for the smaller jurisdictions as the capacity leverage. So we look forward to working on many of the topics that have been discussed today.
Thank you. Anybody else have any other questions? I know we tried to go once, going twice. It's just having all of this experience and knowledge in the room is very exciting. Okay, Parker, I think maybe.
All right, well, thank you so much. I think that we have made it through this portion of the meeting. Thank you all so much for being here. And please feel free to send me any of the materials we discussed, and I will make sure that everyone in this room and on this meeting and anyone not present today will get that along with some notes and other follow-up materials.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And Parker or Chair Scar, I'm not sure who's your chair here, maybe it's Mr. Gallagher. Is it all right if I stay and listen to your development committee update and a few other things just to learn more?
Yeah, this is an open public meeting and we welcome you anytime to join us and stay as long as you wish.
Thank you so much.
With that, we will move on to the development committee updates, which I will be providing today. We had a really good meeting this week. We discussed several topics, including zombie properties, derelict building ordinance, identifying affordable housing sites, communicating with our real estate and our development communities, as well as communicating with our cities and non-incorporated areas. And then finally, we talked about a test site to create a development package for, which is something that got brought up in this meeting. So with the zombie properties, we kind of decided to define what zombie properties are as it exists here in Tillamook, because if you don't know it, zombie property was a term coined after the 2008 housing collapse, and it's a very specific situation where a bank owns a property and for whatever reason, they don't want to continue with the foreclosure process, they don't want to take possession of it, or they do own it and they don't want to maintenance it. It's a situation where basically there is a negligent or non-attentive owner. And so we kind of for our purposes defined it as some combination of derelict, uncared for, mortgage delinquent, tax delinquent, abandoned, uncontactable or deceased owner, squatter occupied, bank owned, negligent, or uninhabitable property. So we cast a very wide net for this, and we also say that not all derelict properties in Tillamook are zombie properties. So there is a difference, and the nuances are slight, but for our conversation, we really just tried to talk about and focus on what are we talking about when we talk about these kind of properties. The Development Committee would like to explore options geared to helping resolve and avoid these zombie house scenarios. So over the coming weeks, I will be collecting, exploring, researching, and then presenting for your opinion, and especially the Development Committee, some options and mechanisms to make sure that we are either actively helping resolve existing zombie property situations or of helping to actively avoid them in the future. So one of the things that we discussed, and Brett Estes was really helpful in suggesting this, but he has experience with a derelict building ordinance that was used in Astoria. And the committee would like to explore what that would look like here. And so once again, I will go and explore how Astoria implemented, designed, and researched their ordinance, and see what steps could be taken to apply that in a very positive and equitable manner in Tillamook County. So you can expect a report back from me on that as well in the coming weeks or month. The committee also wanted to better understand the current state of code enforcement, which is something I'll be looking into, and we'll make more of a casual report on that in our next meeting. And the committee also wanted to start working to connect community, nonprofit, and volunteer options to appropriate derelict or uncared for property, meaning we would just like to have some sort of active role in making sure that we are connecting with the organizations who might want to come out and mow an elderly citizen's yard or help them do various tasks that could help the upkeep of their property and thus the whole community. So I'm going to start trying to reach out, find out who those organizations are, what sort of activities they're performing, and then start to learn how I can connect them to the homeowners that might need that kind of assistance. Committee also wants to start working on identifying affordable housing sites. These are a list of just properties that they could be identified, could be brought to a developer either now or in the future. Just start to centralize all of the known property that could be developed into something that would make an impact on our housing deficit. We don't have a master list, so to speak, of this. And so this also falls into communicating with the real estate and development community. The development community just wants to have a 10,000 foot view of all of the things that are on the ground that might be developed, even if we don't have a good path forward for them, just to start keeping our tabs on it and elevate our understanding of it.
Parker, I'm sorry to interrupt, just a point of clarification. You said looking at all of the potentially affordable development properties. Are you exclusively looking to keep it affordable, or is it extended to the middle workforce housing?
Absolutely extends to workforce housing as well.
I think it's important, historically, this has been an issue for me, just to always make sure that we're using terminology that it isn't limited in nature to affordable to the AMI level.
Thank you. And affordable housing is one of those terms that used to cast such a big net, and now it's more specific now. So please forgive me as I adapt to the modern linguistics. But it is a very important point that yes, this will also incorporate workforce, and it could, if it was identifying the right property, include affordable home ownership or other kind of important new housing. But so generally just trying to also inventory any county-owned property or any county-owned or any tax delinquent property that might become county-owned in the future. Just trying to, again, create that larger scale, high-level view and just start tracking things a little more carefully within the development committee. Another is communicating with the real estate and development community. The committee would like to establish communication channels in this area. This is something that I am working on, and I'll begin next week, on the 24th, I'll begin with my first conversation with some local realtors. And over the next few months, I plan to get myself in front of every real estate and development organization, both in Tillamook County and all the way to Portland when necessary. So really trying to...
Parker?
Yes, go ahead again.
Parker. Oh, I just wanted to mention that one of the people on our committee is Mary Kay Campbell, who is going to be the president of the Board of Realtors next year. So I think we have a really good connection there, as well as with Tom Jarrett. That's our group right now. We're going to get some more people on our team to work on this.
Yep, thank you, Ed. So we will continue to open up those communication channels. And then the last thing, and this came up today in our meeting, but we had a conversation about picking one piece of property that we think is as close to shovel-ready property that falls within a derelict, uncared for, zombie property, and putting together a package of what all can we do to identify a potential site, do some preliminary due diligence activities, do some tracking kind of what the development process would be, creating a timeline so that we could then have a package to take to developers and say, here is the legwork we have done on this property, are you interested? And just to kind of, again, cut down that lead time, cut down the carrying costs, cut down the timeline for developers, and maintain that developer-friendly environment we are trying to establish here.
We were thinking in part about being kind of a demonstration project, maybe a duplex or a triplex that would demonstrate an affordable middle income housing type development. So that was kind of the idea that we discussed. This is we're still working on this. We have one more meeting before we will come back and talk to the full commission on this. So it's a work in progress, and Parker did some excellent notes, and we had a really good conversation.
Well, it does complete my report from our finance committee meeting, unless anybody else would like to add their voice into that. Pardon me, development. That's my next one. Next up, we have the outreach committee update.
Yeah, so we had a great meeting, and thanks to Parker for putting a draft comprehensive media strategy together. We reviewed that through most of the meeting, at least the part that I was able to be present for. So, but really looking strategically at using best practices and expanding the media channels that we're using and optimizing, using, again, best practices for really expanding our reach and impact with the communications that we're sharing. Parker's also been working with us to finalize getting the multifamily housing grant fund application posted on the website. And shout out to Kristen for being our eagle eye, taking the time to really proof all of this from the perspective of a potential user. Sometimes we are looking at something so much that we don't see what we don't see. And she's really fantastic about picking up on little things that are going to, again, optimize the uptake of the information we're putting out there, which is really the goal for us. Again, thanks to Parker and the team at DCD for increasing the number of social shares that we're getting out. That's going to increase the number of eyeballs that we have on the content that we're sharing out. We kind of lapsed in our shares with the transitions in staffing. So that's picking back up. And just in general, working to streamline our processes. Very grateful to have Parker in his role and the capacity that adds. Anything else that I'm missing because I wasn't able to stay for the full meeting?
I don't think so. I just think it was interesting to hear a new perspective about ways we could get information out. I think we started the call really talking about a social media plan, and we kind of ended up with more of a broader media and engagement plan, which was kind of fun to go through that process together and talk through. And so, yeah, I think that covered it.
And then I think I got two things. Just wanted to clarify when Michelle said that the application was going on the website, what she was referring to is we now have one PDF document that shows every single question of the application. The application has been on there for a while, but we do now have it so that anybody can see the entire application process, and it very clearly says, not for submission, so people aren't going to hopefully hand me physical applications at any point. And then the other thing I would like to share from that meeting is that we will be doing our first paid boosted social media coming up soon. Tomorrow being 1 month away from the application deadline, I thought that a good first boosted post would be a deadline announcement post saying that it's 30 days out, and to reuse the announcement imagery and media from the initial announcement to do that. And so unless I hear any objections tomorrow, I will do our first paid boosted post. And I would just appreciate everybody, not necessarily like sharing it right away, but just being mindful of when it pops up into your feed, how you see it in your feed, and any feedback you have for me, please let me know, because I obviously can't see everything. And so how you experience our first paid post will be very helpful to hear.
Anything else, Kristen? Thanks.
All right, on to Finance Committee, which is also me. We had a very productive meeting there as well. Just a few points to communicate. The Finance Committee has changed the date of their November meeting from 11/22 to 11/21 to avoid conflict with the Thanksgiving holiday. And at our meeting, we will begin preliminary reviews of the multifamily rental housing fund applications. A few of the things that came up in this meeting were concerns over individual application assistance, and the committee posed the question, what should be done with applications that are incomplete, ineligible, or otherwise strongly unlikely to be awarded funds? This was an undecided item that we decided needed more thoughts. We had two arguments heard. One was anyone who puts the effort in to finishing an application to the end should have the opportunity to come and present their project, even if it is unlikely to succeed. And the argument against is this is a time-consuming activity and may frustrate the overall process. So we'll continue to evaluate what to do in that kind of situation, and we may wait until we see how many of those types of applications come in. But I think it's just important that the Housing Commission in general be aware that we are considering these items.
Can I just make a suggestion? Because for some reason Shark Tank is popping into my mind. There's a lot of learning that can come from these opportunities, and bringing people forward, if it's not too many examples, could be really beneficial both for the developers themselves to understand where they have work to do, but also if people are tuning in and watching the process and are maybe thinking about jumping into the process themselves, there's quite a bit of learning that could happen from that standpoint too. So just to throw that out there.
I absolutely agree, and I think one of the ways that we're kind of envisioning the ideal solution is if we have some of these, I will contact them individually and help prep them all the way through helping them prepare a presentation. Because I think the learning opportunity and the institutional knowledge that we can grow from even bad applications is important for our process and to help us improve. So I definitely appreciate and agree with that. Another thing that came up during this meeting is that our framework document for the rental housing fund needs some updating, and it needs some updating to make sure it reflects the intent that the commission had when writing or setting up the whole program. Right now, we do not actually specify that this is really intended for new housing projects that are adding housing. We use language like projects in any stage of development. And that means that there are situations where somebody who has owned a property that has multifamily housing and he's been fixing it up for 2 decades, there might be kind of a confusion of if this fund is really meant to help him replace the roofs on some houses that he already owns, even though he has been renting it for, below 50% AMI for the entire time they've owned it. So it creates a gray area that while I think it's really important to hear those stories and make sure the community is aware that people are applying for these reasons, I do think it's important to make sure that we provide some clarity in our framework document, especially with the intent. So unfortunately, we are in the process of our open application, so it's not possible to take that document down and edit it because that would become unfair for people who have done that in the future, or in the past, who have already applied. But I will be taking a hard look at the framework document as the application's closed to make sure that we are spelling out the intent and providing more clarity for what this fund's goal of effect is. So we will begin that as soon as the application process closes. And I'd just like to acknowledge that Mr. Stanley in the room is the reason why this has come to light, and that he has been a very principled landlord, offering very much below market, below 50% in some cases AMI rent for many years to people whom he's very concerned about their water bill rising and their ability to pay rent. And he's trying to avoid paying rent and was hoping to find funds to help some necessary repairs. I'm going to continue to work with Mr. Stanley to find alternative funds that are not the multifamily rental housing fund, because this is not their intended purpose. But there is other opportunities, and as housing coordinator, I'm going to work to connect him to those other opportunities to make sure that he can preserve that affordable housing. So that's just one that came up that I really wanted to share, and I wanted to make sure that Mr. Stanley knew that it was shared today. Of course. The other things that came up was the application, making sure that the PDF document was there of all of the questions, which has now gone live and everyone is available to see that. And then finally, there is one more important piece of business that came up during this meeting, and that is that I was informed that while we have this very robust process for evaluating and scoring the projects that come in to applying for this money, we don't have much of a process for deciding what percent of the total funds we have available goes to what project. Am I understanding that correctly? Miss, are you still there? Yeah, Ms.
I am here, and can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, we did land on a process last time. It was my understanding that part of this meeting was going to be reviewing the qualitative process as a full commission, so I'm hoping that can happen next month in time for us to have the presentation. But that did come from the Finance Committee last time after everything was put together. Could it be more robust? Sure. And more clear? Definitely. So if that's something that you have the capacity to look at, that would be wonderful.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, I captured that a little incorrectly. But yes, the committee does want to review and make sure that we have a acceptable process for how we delineate what percentage of the total funds available to each project. Yes. Did I miss anything else, Finance Committee folks? Okay.
Since I'm unable to attend next...
Oh, go ahead.
Since I'm unable to attend next month's meeting, I would like to just confirm that we can get that on the agenda for next month, because we don't have any more time after that to have a review of the qualitative process.
I will make sure that it is on the agenda, and my mistake for not getting that specifically on the agenda for this one.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, I will pass it off to Commissioner Scar.
Okay, I know we're getting short on time, so I'll talk fast, and feel free to follow up with questions later. So House Bill 5019 was brought up earlier. It is related to emergency and homeless housing. Tillamook County did receive $750,000 through that process. $266,000 of that is going to CARE to add an additional 20 beds to the shelter that they are already developing. So just kind of heads up on that one. And then there's $500,000 that goes for rehousing, which will go to CARE and then will be shared as needed across the community. So for agencies working with those experiencing homelessness. So that does fit into our sort of housing continuum. So I'll share that. The property sale for the county is final. We purchased the 46 acres, 38 of which hopefully will end up being developable outside of wetlands. So it's a really great thing that we have and are holding on to, and one of the reasons that I am a dog on the bone with infrastructure, because until the city of Tillamook solves the infrastructure problem, we will not be able to do development on that piece of property, and we have some other things to do as well. But we look forward to partnering with the city of Tillamook in moving that process forward as rapidly as we can so that we can begin to put that property into some form of development. And just a celebration, the final grant or forgivable loan of the last multifamily rental cycle came before the commissioners this week. Parker brought that to us, and last year is now complete. Everybody has their agreements, everybody has their funding as needed, so we can close that door, and which is perfect timing because we're opening the door on the next one. So I think those are the updates I have. Thanks.
All right. I think all of my updates got captured in my other updates.
Okay.
And
be
public
right on
comment?
How about filling the vacant seats we have on the commission? Are you guys still?
So interviews have been done,
Okay.
and we have a recommended slate, which will come, I'm sorry, next month, because just
Right on.
Sarah's on vacation, and Ed and I finished them up right at the end of last week, so we will be moving that forward as soon as she gets back, but we have completed them.
And I do believe we do have a public comment.
Well, I just don't know how I fit in. Unfortunately, I had to leave right before you started talking about my special interest. With that being said, I have infrastructure that is built from 1947 that's starting to become more necessary for more infrastructure, more work. I have 2 tenants that are seniors. And I get that you guys are doing workplace development, that kind of stuff makes tons of sense. Seniors in my situation are on fixed income. I'm trying to hold the rent down. City of Wheeler's adding more to my bill with water, city, Halem wastewater. All the bills start piling up. I have some resources that I'm using of my own. And if there is any public funding, and thank you, Parker, for being such a great advocate for me. Appreciate that immensely. I'd sure like to know about it, and it's hard to know where, and the only one I rely on is Parker, so, I've written your name, Commissioner,
Sure, yeah, we can send
that
this
kind of thing, and Melanie Jenke had a couple of governmentally, or whatever that. Great stuff, I mean, I feel really overwhelmed with what everyone's doing, and it must be a huge task, and being retired, just hammering a nail, my shovel ready, I'm replacing my shovel because it's kind of beat up, trying to be cleaning it up, that kind of thing. I'd like to keep the rents low. I still have another property that I live in, so I can commute and have a healthy place to live other than a greenhouse. And, if I need to develop another piece of property, I could. And I'm hoping the city of Wheeler is here because we have poor water system. It's definitely a brownfield situation if there is anyone from Wheeler. I don't recognize anyone because frankly, I don't get rubbed elbows with a lot of the people like you. But that's my comment. I don't know if I missed anything.
No, that was great. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll keep in communication.
Thank you.
A lot of what was shared in today's meeting actually is more relevant to you than it is to some of what we're trying to do. So I think that was good news for you with all of the legislation. Sounds like there's some people that can connect, that Parker can connect you with that can help navigate those processes.
And before we completely close up, I do have a legislative committee update that we should probably hear.
Just quickly, we did meet with Senator Weber on September 20th, I believe. We had a great conversation with her, and we carried forward our legislative concepts. And I think we got great feedback. She is only going to be able to personally carry 2 bills in this short session. So she said she has a slate about 20 or 30, but I'm hoping that maybe our advocacy can be effective for this upcoming year. And so we will be continuing forward with our process, and especially we had a great conversation with the city of Tillamook that were there in force, which was pretty amazing to advocate for infrastructure. So we hope to continue that conversation going forward. Quick and short, thanks. That's okay.
So with that, I think we can conclude.
All right, perfect.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
See you next month.
And thank you, Carrie, for carrying the torch here. Appreciate it.
Not a problem.
So one of the other things we're gonna